Sorry, my little bit having a bit of a issue today, so I apologize for that. All right, I think now we are where we should be. Okay. I'm just going to take this back a little bit. We were testing the video before, so we know it works. But now I wanted to just kind of let you know a little bit about the Edmonton Newcomer Center and this project that I'm here with Siwi and Samus today called Cultural Advantage. We are a project within the Edmonton Newcomer Center, which has been around for over 44 years. And this particular project is specifically for helping to increase intercultural competency for employers because we have definitely some gaps, and all of the responsibility for adaptation has been on the shoulders of newcomers, but our systems, our workplaces, those sorts of things are not really prepared to kind of meet them where they're at. And so that's kind of a big part of what we do. But one of the things that you're going to see as we move through is that a lot of these concepts aren't just going to be important for newcomers in our workplaces. A lot of these things are really good strategies for any employee that we have, and you'll see that as we move forward. So what we're going to do first is just kind of put ourselves in the headspace of again, what Cultural Advantage is designed to do, and it's to shift mindsets, transforming newcomer retention from challenge to competitive advantage. And as I mentioned, a lot of these things are going to be relevant regardless of who your employees are, but there are certain considerations, of course, for newcomers. And we are seeing more and more newcomers branch out from the main cities into more rural areas. And so that's going to be an influx that's coming in. And they're going to be employees, they're going to be, people accessing services, they're going to be customers and clients. So all of these things are going to be important for us to keep in mind. Some of the things that we're going to touch on today, we're going to talk about elements of recruiting and interviewing. We're also going to be talking about the onboarding process, how it relates to company culture, which actually relates to all of these things. Teamwork and leadership and retention. Now, these are very involved concepts. What we're doing today is kind of like a lunch and learn. It's a short little workshop that's going to touch on all of these things. It's going to set up a foundation. But of course, you might have more questions, and we're going to have time for questions, certainly at the end here. But if you have more questions or if there's not enough time to get to everybody, I will be leaving my contact information, and I encourage you to reach out to me if there are more things that you want to know. And how to get the most out of today. You guys are already doing it, so keeping yourself on audio mute unless you're answering or questions or commenting. Definitely to participate in the activities. It's going to help you become, more comfortable with the topics and also get a chance to play around with them a little bit, which deepens our understanding. Definitely keep an open mind. Some of these things that we might talk about might be a little different than what you do within your organization. And that's the point here, is to learn potentially different ways of doing things that could benefit you. And I do recommend that you take notes. Certainly, you can have access to the PowerPoint itself, but it only has, of course, the key terms and ideas like most PowerPoints do. So you may want to take a few notes just to help yourself with retention. So we're going to start with something, and in this view, I can't really see comments as easily. So hopefully, folks will keep an eye on the comments there for me. But I want you to think about why you're here today. I want you to potentially, if you can, if you don't mind sharing, putting it in the chat. But everybody's here for a reason. That could be that the topic is very personal to you. It could be that you know that your organization needs to kind of, shake things up and maybe do things in a different way. What kind of reasons does everybody have to be here? So I want you to think about that. And I want you to put that in the chat because this is something that we will circle back to. And it will be something that pops up later on that's going to help you to connect with that information. Also, too, knowing what your particular considerations and things like that are going to allow me to better be able to talk about examples, etc., that might be relevant to you. So take a moment and put your thoughts in the chat. And I know for me, I'm here because I'm presenting, but I'm also here because this is a passion of mine. So working with helping people and especially working with newcomers, etc., was something that I had a passion for. And I had wanted to work with the Edmonton Newcomer Center for many years before I ended up being able to come on board. And it is something that I very much enjoy. So I'm not I'm not sure if anybody's put anything in yet, but oh yeah. Okay. Help employers maximize their hiring retention practices. Yes. Yeah. And that's what we're going to hopefully be able to do for everybody. So other people might be typing things in, but we're gonna move to the next area here. I wanted to point out that this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's from the former mayor of Dawson City, Yukon. His name's Wayne. Some of you may have heard this quote before. Canadians are born all over the world. It just sometimes takes them a bit of time to get here. And I think that's a really beautiful quote. And this is something that I think all of us kind of need to understand is unless you're part of an Indigenous community here in Canada, you are either an immigrant or you are a descendant of immigrants. So the immigrant story is Canada's story. And as I mentioned, what we're going to be talking about here today really has, newcomer employees in mind. But a lot of agencies that I work with have said these exact principles that you're talking about are things that can be applied to any employee and any organization. So it's really nice that it has that carryover. But yeah, this is a beautiful quote. And this is one of those things that I think, again, can really resonate with each one of us. So I know for me, I'm third generation Canadian. And it was my ancestors who made the trek over here to Canada and laid down the roots. For some of you, that might be a bit more recent. You might be second or first, or even you yourselves might be newcomers. And so you can speak to, that journey and that process a little bit more maybe than some of the rest of us. So this is another thing where I just want you to really kind of think about what that means to you and what you think that means as far as the community that you're in, right? So it's another one of those sort of thought kind of experiments where you get to kind of think of, well, what's my connection to that story, that immigrant story, that story of Canada? So, as we are thinking about that, we're going to jump into our first topic. So, I had mentioned before when we were going over the topics at the beginning, is that company culture really is at the heart of each one of those other topics. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about what that is and why it's so important. So, company culture, for those of you who may have heard the term but never really, thought too much about what that means, it's both the formal and informal ways that a workplace does something. And every company has its own unique culture. Some things are similar across the board with most companies, but each company will do things slightly differently. And that's going to be some of the more formal things, like things that you can see on their website, like their policies, their company values, goals, that kind of thing. But it also can be reflected in sort of, things like dress code, how employees, kind of interact with management, how they're treated. And it can also be reflected in things like charities or volunteer work that an organization does. This is not a list, of course, in its entirety, but this is kind of giving you a space to sort of understand what exactly that means and to reflect on your own company culture. Um, why it's important, why it matters to kind of what we're talking about today is that your company culture sets the stage for everything. And this also includes things like how you advertise your positions, how do your onboarding, your interviews, those sorts of things. And a more sort of accepting and welcoming company culture makes those processes a lot easier and tends to have much better sort of outcomes. So specifically, it helps to attract the right people. If you've got a good company culture, and that's something that gets out there when you are hiring or when you're interacting with the public, that's the kind of thing that's going to attract people that already kind of are good fits with your organizational structure and how you do things. It can positively impact elements like employee and client happiness. So if your employees are happy, it generally means that there's going to be better interactions with the people that you service, whether those are considered clients or participants, however that's structured for whatever your company does. Generally, this also leads to increased productivity. Companies that have good, positive company cultures where their employees are happy and feel that they have a good environment tend to have less sick days. There tends to be less internal organizational problems and higher employee retention. And that's something that all of us uh, need to be aware of because, and a lot of you already know, the process of hiring it costs money. Now, that might not always be dollars that you see physically spent, but it's money spent on people who have to do the research of the position, who have to advertise, who have to interview, who have to do the training and on the onboarding. And that's a big investment for an organization. So if an organization is constantly seeing a high turnover of staff, that's a lot of money that can't go into moving the company forward, right? So company culture is at the heart of retention and the onboarding process and all of those things. So this is why it's the first thing that we take a look at because we really have to understand how that impacts everything. So, not all of us can say that at all moments we've worked for places that have good company culture. And sometimes that's not the fault of the company. It could be that a company is in upheaval, maybe bought out or maybe having to downsize, and those sorts of things can impact. But it's building it back up and working on creating that positive company culture that's going to really help move those steps forward. So, what are some of the ways you can create a welcoming company culture, especially when it comes to attracting and maintaining all employees, but certainly newcomer employees? It's good to encourage employees to share elements of their culture. This can be done in very subtle ways, like even just things like potlucks. Um, Being able to either celebrate or at least acknowledge cultural festivals and things like that. I know in my company newsletter, of course, we are, based around newcomers, so it's not no surprise we do this. But even in our company newsletter, we'll talk about things like, wishing people happy Diwali and those sorts of things. It's very little, but it has a big impact, and so we want to encourage that. Um, Also, too, it's a good idea to look at our marketing. This is something that can be challenging because even right now there isn't a lot of diversity out there. So, for instance, if you're creating, advertising on your social media or whatever, trying to find ways to encourage diversity in the people that you're having in those advertisements. So, looking for people from diverse backgrounds to include. Even promoting internal professional development. So, workshops like the one that you're attending right now. There's a lot out there, and having your staff be, well trained and having the opportunity to learn things and sort of maybe work against maybe their own biases and those sorts of things. The opportunities presented really help to create that company culture. And that way, anybody that you're bringing in as new hires have a much better chance of feeling like they are welcomed, like they are moving into an organization that is very stable and very welcoming. This then into the first step or helps support the first step, which is the recruiting and interviewing of candidates. So we know that this is a tough job. It can be very labor intensive. But why do we need to care about this particular step? One of the things that is really reported by, again, not just newcomers, but pretty much everyone, is that a lot of job ads and applications can be confusing. Using terminology that's not familiar, using vague descriptions, and maybe templated from previous job ads instead of uniquely for the job that you are looking for. So it involves a little bit more work to make sure that we're creating something that makes sense. So another way to look at this is that the process isn't just for a candidate to impress you, but for you to impress the candidates. Because even if somebody is not going to be shortlisted for an interview, they are still potentially part of your client base or service base. So the impression that you're making on the people that are coming in for interviews will go out into the public to other people that will apply. And this is again where that positive company culture comes into place, because if things make sense, if the process is straightforward, if it's comfortable, even if somebody doesn't get the position, your reputation is still going to be positive when they leave that experience. So this is why something like making sure you're paying attention to the recruiting and interviewing candidates step matters. Now, how we go about doing that is we first need to make sure that we are being very clear about what we're including. And so we're going to take a look at a short video, and then we're going to kind of see what we've learned from that video in order to apply the best sort of practices to the advertising or not just advertising, but putting our job ads and applications, all those sorts of things. We want to be straightforward. So I'm just going to test to make sure you guys can hear this.
Welcome to an intercultural learning moment, brought to you by Cultural Advantage. In this video, we look at a miscommunication between a potential new employee and an employer about getting high at work. A new immigrant was looking for a job. They found an opportunity and decided to apply. In addition to submitting their cover letter and resume, they were also required to fill out a questionnaire. The questions were about common workplace situations and how the potential employee would handle them. The hiring manager for this employer found the application for this potential employee. They were very impressed by this person's skills, experience, and enthusiasm. However, one of their responses to the questionnaire was troubling to the hiring manager and didn't really seem in keeping with what they had read in the person's cover letter and resume. The hiring manager decided to call this person in for an interview, thinking that they could get some more clarification when they talked to them in person. Eventually, the hiring manager began to talk about the answers that the applicant had to the questionnaire. Specifically, the question of whether or not it was okay to get high at work. The hiring manager asked them why they answered yes to that question. The applicant then explained that his interpretation of the question was that it was okay to get happy or excited to be at work. With this explanation, the applicant's response to this question made a lot more sense. And they now felt comfortable bringing that employee on board. When they did, they explained to this new employee what the actual meaning of this question was, and that his response to the question made it look like he thought it was okay to take drugs and come to work high, which was another way of saying being intoxicated. This was a learning experience for this new employee as well. Prior to this moment, they didn't realize that getting high had this meaning here in Canada. This employee turned out to be an excellent hire for this organization. The hiring manager was grateful to not have missed out on an opportunity to have such a good worker. This situation also allowed them to realize that they needed to rethink the wording and the approach to applications for future jobs. And this immigrant employee was happy knowing that a miscommunication did not prevent him from getting and working at a good job. We're looking.
All right. I just cut off that last end because that's just reiterating cultural advantage, and you already know about that. This was an actual real life circumstance. So, in our time working with newcomers, not just in Edmonton, but in surrounding area, we've also been working very closely with employers. And this was an issue that popped up for this employer that we worked with. So, they were very concerned about what they read in the application saying, well, this person thinks it's okay to get high at work. And of course, when we were working with them, our question was, do they actually know what that means? And so this employer did call this person in because their resume and cover letter looked great, but it was just that concerning answer to the question on the application. And because they did that, they realized there was a miscommunication. And they said many times afterwards, I'm so glad that I did that because they were such a good hire. It would have been really sad had we missed out on that just because of a lack of clarity. So this is a real world example, but again, it's not just going to be newcomers who might have difficulty with or interpret something on an application or something of that nature. So just making sure that you're clear, or if you use a term, you're defining it, it's going to make sure that people will be able to better understand each other. And so this is why our systems need to be looked at and need to be kind of analyzed and say, is this the best way of me doing this? And this leads into the next element I want to talk about here.
Welcome to.
Get over here. Is how do we take what we learned from that and apply it into actual job ads? So a couple tips for recruiting candidates, of course, begins with that job ad. One of the things that's recommended is to advertise in diverse places. So it can make it a little bit easier to just have like those one or two places that, organizations say, well, this is where we've always done things. But if you cast a little bit of a wider net and advertise in new and more diverse places, you could get a much wider range of candidates. And this is usually something that we recommend to organizations that say, well, I can't find any good applicants. Well, that's because you've just posted your ad in like maybe two places. And if you do go a little bit further afield, you might get more people. And that's going to allow you to be able to choose somebody that might more closely fit what you're looking for. Keep language very, very simple. You want to avoid jargon. Even people who've worked in the same industry, and they don't have to be newcomers for this, but even from company to company, the jargon or terminology is going to be different, and you can't expect everybody to know it. Also, too, things like acronyms. Embarrassingly, I must say that when I started at the Newcomer Center, there were some terms that were thrown around that I didn't know what they were, and I didn't want to tell anybody I didn't know what they were. And it took me a few years before I actually learned the definition of them. And that's what you're going to see a lot. People aren't going to come out and say, I don't know what this is, because they're afraid that that's going to reflect poorly on their chances, right? So we want to make sure we're not adding those hurdles in the moment of them reading the job ad. So we have to define things, or if you can get away without using some of these jargon terms and acronyms, then do that. But if you do have to use them or feel you have to use them, make sure you define them. Be detailed instead of relying on the vague terms that you often see in job ads. So there's a lot of job ads that I see out there where they're like, we're looking for a rock star. Okay, what exactly does that mean, right? We want somebody to be able to hit the ground running. All of these idioms, etc., can be really difficult and really hard to understand. My advice, stay very far away from that, and really concentrate on detailed, actual language that that explains what you're looking for. Don't rely on those vague terms. It doesn't help anyone. And focus on the skills required. So, still, and this is where often using templates from job ads in the past can kind of come back to kind of haunt us. Is there's jobs I've seen posted where it says, "Oh, you have to have your own, car and things like that." But there's no reason for that. They've just kept that on from a previous job ad because they've templated that. And really, somebody could very easily take a 10-minute bus ride to get to work and they didn't need a car for it. It was just left in because nobody actually analyzed that particular job ad and carried things over from previous. Right. So what we're going to do with this information, we're actually going to take a look at a job ad, and I want you to in the chat, I want you to post kind of what your thoughts are on it. I think everybody had access to this or were sent this, but I'm going to actually put this up on the screen. So I'm going to come away from the PowerPoint for a moment, and then we are going to here. We're going to take a look at a job ad. And I think you guys should be able to see my screen. And I'm just, oops, hang on. Yeah, it won't let me share and see the chat. So, Haranya, hopefully you can kind of do that for me. So, can everybody see the Word document? Has it popped up? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to adjust this so everybody can see. So this is based off of a real job ad, and I want you to take a few moments just to read it. Actually, I think I have to make it slightly smaller. I want you to take a few moments to read it, and I want you in the chat to kind of flag anything that you think would be something that you would change based off of what we just talked about. So again, as you're reading it, I'll just remind you things like terminology, acronyms, any kind of vague descriptions, anything like that. Yes, yeah, and thanks, Mike. You can. Okay. I think I see a hand. I can't see whose that is, so Mike, I'll let you jump on that.
Hi, Davina, please go ahead and unmute and
Hi, yes. Thank you so much, Mike. So I was actually just typing my answer, but I'm glad that I'm able to share this with all of you. My name is Divino and I work for the Brooks YMCA. I actually had the opportunity to look at this job ad when I think it was Mike who also sent out this job ad. It was actually quite interesting because someone who has an extensive background in recruitment. I noticed a lot of issues. I can think of nine, but I can share two.
Please,
The
yeah.
first one is the discriminatory language, which is a potential human rights violation. I think there's a wording that says native English speaker
Hmm.
requirement.
Yeah.
This is discriminatory under the Canadian human rights legislation, and it excludes qualified candidates based on origin rather than their ability to
Hmm.
actually do the job. Instead of using native English speaker, they can use the phrase fluency in English, written and spoken required if
Hmm.
it's really necessary for the individual to be a native like speaker.
Hmm.
The second one is the informal and unprofessional tone. I can think of three here. Our team is like a family. While that is a very nice to hear, we can actually use the word we are collaborative and supportive team environment. Another one is hit the ground running. You mentioned that, Julie, earlier. Instead of using that, you can use ability to adapt quickly to a fast-paced environment. And
Hmm.
one more thing is make the position their own. That is, you can change that and fix it into demonstrate initiative and ownership of responsibilities instead. The reason why I mentioned those terminologies or like phrases, These phrases are subjective, vague, and potentially misleading. So family language can also discourage applicants who value boundaries or fair workplace expectations. And those are the only thing I think I want to share today. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that.
Yes, thank you. Does anybody want to add to what Davino has mentioned? While people are thinking, like, some excellent points here. And I mean, I am still always surprised. So you pointed out that it is a human rights violation to say native English speaker, but it's surprising to me how many times I still see that in job ads. When you're absolutely right, like what somebody should put here if they need somebody who has very high English competence, they can say that. They can say, they might even be able to reference if they're familiar with English levels that people have to take training, etc., to hit certain areas. They can say we want a CLB, at least a CLB 5 or something like that, and define that. But there's absolutely no reason and no justification to be asking for a native English speaker for things like this. You were very correct about things like self-starter, family. Now that is something that I think was really good that you pointed out, is that to say that, oh, our work team is like a family. Well, that could be something that would make somebody go, oh, does this mean that people have no boundaries? Or imagine if they don't have the best relationship with their family, you're certainly not going to be attracting them by putting that in there, right? So we have to be more specific. So there's a lot of these vague things that aren't going to be helpful, but they're things that we've seen on job ads. And so we tend to regurgitate them, and it doesn't make any sense. So yes, we need to focus on the actual facts of what we need, right? So that's would be where we would change that native English speaker to, proficient, some level of proficiency with English, whatever you're looking for. We need to take that vague kind of terminology out. There are a lot of things in here where when we look at it, we can see that this is not really going to be the best job ad to get us the results we're looking for. And when we create hurdles for people, even at the point where they're trying to apply for a job, we can't really be surprised when we don't get the results we're looking for, right? Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to add to that? Do they agree with everything that Davino had pointed out? Yeah, it was pretty good. So thank you for that. So this is something that I would encourage you to kind of think about for your own processes. It might not necessarily even be things this obvious. So you do want to, and usually this is a good thing to kind of pair with somebody else, have the job ad, read the job ad, and then give to somebody else and get their opinion as well. If the job ad itself isn't really the top of what we can do, the applicants are tending not to be necessarily as confident or what we're looking for. So that's on us to make that work. So I'm going to reshare the PowerPoint here back to where we just left off. So hopefully that's given everybody some food for thought. The next thing I want to talk about, we're going to take a look at another video here, is the interviewing process, because a lot of what we just saw in the job ad can leak over to the interview process. And so here's where we're going to talk about, okay, so we've shortlisted, we're bringing people in for interviews. How are the interview questions that we're used to here in Canada, these ones that we hear asked all the time, how can those be problematic? So we're going to take a look at this as well. Again, thumbs up if you can hear the audio.
Welcome to an intercultural learning moment, brought to you by Cultural Advantage. In this video, we begin our look at the trouble with interview questions, starting with handling conflict. When looking to find an ideal candidate for a job, there are a number of common questions that get asked during the interview, in addition to the ones particular to that role. We're usually looking for certain specific answers to particular interview questions. We're often trying to gauge the applicant's experience with interpersonal skills and whether or not they'll be a good fit with our organization. One of these common questions is, have you ever had a conflict with a coworker, and how did you solve that conflict? The way that Canadians are expected to deal with this is by taking initiative. This means that they do not talk to their supervisor or manager first. Instead, they try to speak to the person that they had the conflict with and come to an understanding and problem solve the situation between the two of them, only involving the supervisor if this fails to solve the conflict. So the answer we're looking for when we ask this question in an interview is that they approach the person and try to resolve the conflict themselves. However, different cultures handle conflict in the workplace differently. So when you're asking the same question to somebody whose work experience is in a different country, you may get a different type of answer. It is important to understand that in some cultures, it would be considered inappropriate not to involve the supervisor when you have a conflict. And this would mean that the person's response to this question would illustrate this difference. They would have been expected to go see their supervisor as soon as a problem arose. This is especially true in cultures where the workplace is much more hierarchical and a person's supervisor must be involved in every step. This not only is essential to the workplace running smoothly, but it's also a sign of respect. So this step was needed for them to effectively do their job. This would mean that their response was that they would talk with their supervisor who helps them deal with the situation. If you can see in a person's resume or application that they have a lot of international experience, you can get a better understanding of the situation by reframing the question. You could instead ask, how were you expected to handle conflict with a coworker in your previous jobs? Once you find out what the expectations were at their previous places of employment, you can lay out the expectations for conflict resolution in this role in your organization. This way, the candidate is aware of the difference between their previous experience and how they would need to handle things if they were successfully onboarded into your organization. By digging deeper into a candidate's experience, it will allow you to better understand why they give the answers that they do. Knowing this, you will more easily be able to guide the candidate to what the expectations would be for conflict management if they were successfully brought into this role in your organization. In turn, the newcomer candidate will be better informed and prepared to meet those expectations, as well as to adapt to and fit in better with existing teams. We're looking forward to working with you.
All right. So this was just one example of a very common interview question, and some of you may remember being asked that of yourself when you were in interviews, or if you interview candidates, that might be one that you ask. But it can be problematic. And again, not just necessarily for newcomers. And as I pointed out, the expectations in some places are very different. With an organization that is very hierarchical, they wouldn't have been encouraged to deal with that conflict themselves. That wouldn't have been appropriate. But in most Canadian workplaces, that whole idea of, figure it out yourself, then if you have a problem, come to me, that's kind of our expectation. So when we hear something different to that, that kind of goes, well, then this isn't a candidate for us. Instead, they need to understand what that expectation is. But this is also true for people who might not have a lot of work experience. And so they might yet not have had a conflict with a coworker or something, and again, might not know what that expectation is. So this is again where that's carryover, not just for newcomers, but for other employees as well. So there are others, and I've got I have another video that talks about another interview question that's quite problematic, which is tell us about yourself, which is a very common one. So, you can always check that one out on our YouTube channel afterwards too. So there's a lot of those questions that can be problematic, especially when you're interviewing somebody who might not necessarily have had a lot of work experience here in Canada.
Welcome to...
I'm going to take that here. So this then prepares us to kind of talk about what kind of things can we do to make sure that that interview process is a lot easier. So you can write a little bit better interview questions, ones that are a little bit more descriptive. And a lot of times people kind of resist this, but there's nothing stopping you when you shortlist candidates to send them some of these questions ahead of time. The mistake that we often make is to think that all of the importance of our interview questions is about getting people to give us an answer on the fly. Okay. And not to say that it's not interesting to get that, but think about projects and assignments that people get, even in the workplace. They're not usually asked in the moment. It's like, okay, I need you to write me a 100-page report in the next 5 minutes. They get time to review, they get time to research and prepare themselves. This can be a great way to actually get the best out of the people that you are interviewing, is allow them to think about things ahead of time and have more answers prepared. You certainly don't have to send them all the interview questions ahead of time if you don't want to. You can save some for that in the moment, but some that require a little bit more deep thought, there is no reason why you can't do that. And that has proven very helpful for organizations in the past. Also, to explain the nature and purpose of the questions of the interview. So if you have to reframe something and say, well, the reason we're asking this question is because we want to know this. Sometimes just adding that little bit is going to help it make sense in people's heads so they can give a much better, much fuller answer. So don't hesitate to do that. And it's also a good idea especially once you've shortlisted candidates, to inform them about the entirety of the process, because every organization has its own sort of structure for that. Some people or some places will interview once, call references and then decide. For other organizations, they have a multi-step interview process. Allowing everybody who's entered that process to know that, and timelines if you have, is going to help. It helps relax people. It helps make sure you're not getting a lot of pestering emails and phone calls as well, if they know what that process is and what to expect. Obviously, there's a lot more elements in here that we could talk about, but these are some of the important ones that I would really encourage you to take into consideration when you're adjusting your own interview techniques. Then, once you've interviewed people and you've decided who you're going to hire, that next important aspect is that onboarding process. And this tends to a lot of times be an area where organizations haven't really done a lot of updating and changing, and it can really benefit from that. So why it matters is that this is your organization's first way to make a impression to a hire. Before, they're an interviewee, they're a candidate, they're potential. But now you're bringing somebody on board, they want to kind of get a good feel of the company. And this is again where your reputation is going to be solidly built with a new employee. So it can help, or it can kind of do the opposite. If it's not a really good onboarding process, that can mean that the candidate is already thinking about, well, maybe I need to look for another job, or I'm not going to be here that long. And again, we don't want that. We want retention because we want to not have to spend that much time and money. So it is the foundation for all of those things. Plus, it's also a time when new hires can start to develop those relationships that are going to be so important for teamwork, not just in their specific, departments and teams, but with everyone in the organization. So this is really a place where organizations need to shine. So some things to help with the onboarding process is, obviously you want to work with them and walk them through any step of any paperwork. I've got an HR background, and I have worked a lot of HR contracts in my time as a consultant. And one of the things that a lot of people that I've worked with have reported is that they've just basically been thunked a big pile of paperwork and said, okay, fill this in, hand it in at the end of the day. But they have questions. And at the first stage, they don't want to necessarily have to chase people down to ask questions because, again, they're afraid of how that reflects on them. Instead, they should be walked through those processes because a lot of these things are new to people. And you can't assume that the paperwork process that you have is the same as what they went through before. Now, this isn't just important for the new hire themselves, it's important for the organization too, because if things aren't filled in properly, or if there's things that are missing, that means more work for everybody. So this is going to benefit folks by kind of holding their hand through that first process and making sure that everything is correct. Don't underestimate the importance of a full tour of the location. I had a somebody that I worked with a little while ago who got hired at an organization. She had only been in Canada for about 7 months, and she got a role that she was really excited about. They didn't give her a tour, and she didn't even know where the bathrooms were. So she actually was afraid to ask, and she left on her break and went to a local, I think, restaurant or convenience store to go to the bathroom, and then came back. Just again, because she didn't want to make it seem like she didn't know where things were, right? But she was really kind of let down by the people who should have been onboarding her and letting her know where all these things are. Providing any necessary materials, making sure that people's logins work, and that they've got, like, keys or key card or those sorts of things. The more people feel prepared, the easier it is for them to be able to start working and start building those relationships. Introducing them to team members, not just team members, but outside contacts, even, somebody in a kitty corner office, even if they're not on that person's team. The more people that they meet and make contact with, the more comfortable they will be. And don't, again, underestimate the importance of emergency procedures, etc. Even if it's not like something like you're not working in a place where there's dangerous goods or anything like that. If something happens, if there's, like, a tornado warning, etc., well, you might have people who have never experienced that before. And if they don't know what those procedures are, they're going to feel even more, kind of out of place and concerned, right? So make sure people have all of those things to prepare them. Oh, I should mention back here, the other thing is talk to previous hires and ask them what kind of things could we add to the onboarding process, or ask them the opinion of the onboarding process. Sometimes the best people are people that have already been working with you, that have gone through that process, because they're the subject matter experts. So don't hesitate to have those conversations, because they really do yield a lot of useful information. Um, Once you have your people, you've onboarded, people have started work. You also have to think about how your organization deals with working in teams and the individual leadership of supervisors, etc. Again, this matters because you want to create a welcoming and supportive environment for staff. This should be an echo of your company culture. Um, People that feel like they are part of a team, or they feel like they belong and they're supported, they work better together. Again, you have fewer internal issues, you have better retention. And strong positive leadership is part of this. So it helps to support that. And a leader that is approachable and that somebody can talk to is going to be able to get on top of issues before they become really difficult to solve. And so you really need to kind of be hands-on. Um, and again, like I said, it should be championing diversity, and it should be accepting and upholding that company culture. So if your leadership team isn't part of that, you're going to have a real disconnect. So this is why these things are equally as important as everything else that we've talked about for that success. Now, some tips of how to do this. Um, uh, Again, create opportunities for people to be introduced to different to their own team, but also to different teams. So some organizations will, like, every once a month, even just do, like, a little event where all the new hires get to kind of meet everybody. And it might be something really informal, like, just like a pizza day, or just everybody gathers, for a team meeting, and everybody gets to be introduced. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to happen. Um, Also, one of those, again, these things that have been brought up where people are like, I didn't really like this. There have been people that said, I got hired, I got thrown into this team, and then I never talked to my supervisor for like 6 months until it was our, one-on-one. And that really leaves people sort of floundering, like they don't know what to do. Am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? So by being involved and checking up on progress and Also making sure that you are talking to your employees, not just when things go wrong, but when things go right. That way, if an issue does happen, they're not automatically feeling like, oh, this person is only going to talk to me when things go bad. So they feel like they have a little bit more of a relationship with you, which benefits being able to work through difficulties or when there's hurdles that need to be jumped over. And acknowledge both individual and team achievements. Often it's good to do this publicly, but don't underestimate, going to somebody and saying, hey, you're doing a really good job, or, that project that you worked on or that idea you had in the meeting was excellent. People really respond to that. Obviously, people love raises and bonuses, etc., but don't underestimate acknowledgement as being a great way to build up somebody's confidence. And another aspect of leadership is that, again, we have these kind of cultural touch points where things are done very differently in different places. And this can be very confusing for employees. You're going to hire people who are not familiar with the way that, let's say, managers and supervisors here work in Canada, and that can be confusing. But you might also hire somebody who is a newcomer into a management position. And so they themselves might not have managed staff in the same way, and that can cause some difficulties. So this video is going to talk about that and why it's important to actually inform and talk to people when in the onboarding process about how management styles work and what your organization is going to expect.
Welcome to an intercultural learning moment, brought to you by Cultural Advantage. In this video, we take a look at the differences in leadership styles and how these differences can impact new employees and new managers. Both of the stories mentioned in this video happened to real people in real workplaces. The first story is about a newcomer employee who just got hired at one of his first jobs in Canada. Shortly after he began his new job, he saw his supervisor walking into the stockroom. His supervisor saw a piece of garbage on the floor, picked it up, and put it into the nearby garbage can. This might not sound out of the ordinary to most people, but from his experience in his previous country, this would never have happened. The second story involves a newcomer that was hired as a manager due to his previous experience. Unfortunately, not long after he started, the people he supervised began to complain to his own supervisor. So, his supervisor had a conversation with him to let him know about these complaints, and that people were saying he wasn't really doing any actual work and was expecting everyone else to do the work for him. This came as quite a surprise to this new manager because previously he had a really good reputation for managing staff and was not clear where the actual problem was. Both of these issues had their roots in the fact that management systems can be very different from country to country and culture to culture. One type of management system is much more hierarchical than the other. This is known as the tall management system or structure. The other is much less hierarchical, and this one is known as the flat management system or structure. This is why it's important to understand that many countries have a more hierarchical or tall management system than Canada. With the tall management structure, managers tend to give all direction or instruction on employee tasks. This means that even small things must be approved by your manager before you're able to do your work. And this was the issue for the newcomer supervisor who had his employees complain about him. He was expecting all of his employees to check with him about every single task that they were supposed to do. And even when there were things that needed to be done and none of the employees were around, he would wait for one of them to come back to do it rather than do it himself. The tall management system also means that managers are rarely involved in non-management work. This is why the employee that saw his supervisor pick up and throw out a piece of garbage was so surprised. That wouldn't be something that he would have encountered in his previous roles in the previous country that he worked in. Although this still varies from workplace to workplace, in general, Canada has a less hierarchical or flat management system. With the flat management structure, managers tend to participate in more aspects of work, including things that are non-management related. They also tend to lead by example and are more likely to pitch in when needed rather than wait for someone else to come and do it. So, having a conversation with new staff about the leadership style in your workplace is helpful. This will help you set up a dialogue where you can lay out the expectations, and the newcomer employees and managers can ask questions for clarification. Addressing this at the time of an employee's onboarding is a good idea, but more information or guidance might be needed as somebody moves into their role. The fact is, people can adapt to a different management style if given the opportunity. Working towards this goal will allow both the organization and its newcomer employees to function much more effectively.
So this is kind of speaks to why this is important, not just for the, employees that you're hiring maybe at entry level or mid level, but if you're bringing somebody in as a manager, things work a little bit differently. And again, as it says, like, different organizations will embrace different levels of this, but in general, Canada tends to have a much more flat structure. At Years ago at the Edmonton Newcomer Center, one of my supervisors, I remember a toilet got clogged, one of our student toilets. And instead of waiting for somebody else to come to do it, he went and unclogged it himself. And let me tell you, all the students, it blew their mind to see a manager unclog a toilet because that never would have happened in some of the places that they had lived, right? So you can imagine how some of these things would be so surprising and shocking. And it could, kind of make people go like, what the heck's going on? Like, what are the expectations here? I'm not comfortable with this, or I don't understand this. And putting somebody in a management position, of course, they're going to do what was comfortable or what was familiar for them. So if you do hire somebody who has international experience into a managerial role, it's helpful to let them know what the expectations are. That manager that was mentioned in here, he had a conversation, or his manager talked to him, and then he went, oh, okay, so this is different than what I was doing before. So was able to tailor how he worked with the staff and goes, okay, so here people are expected to take more initiative. I don't have to basically micromanage everything like I did before. And with that understanding, everything worked out well, but that conversation had to happen, right? So this is again why that dialogue, that information is really important.
Welcome.
Oops. Um, so some other ways to kind of help improve how we are working and building our teams and supporting our managers here is, again, like it said in the video, make people aware of the management style, right? Saying, here, people are expected to take more initiative. Here, you don't wait for your manager to kind of tell you everything, right? You've got a job description, you've got this. But again, don't expect people to necessarily just be able to transition over automatically. Check in with them. Ask them what kind of support they need. And with time, you will see that work out fine. But there's oftentimes just that little bit of transition that needs to happen. Um, it's beneficial to pair new hires with a mentor, with somebody who knows your organization, who knows the company culture, those sorts of things, and then they can guide them as well. And it can be a little bit more informal, which can be a bit more comfortable for the individual. And just be patient. All of these things can happen. What you're looking for can take place as long as somebody has enough time to adjust and has the appropriate information. Now we're talking about retention. So again, if we hire somebody and they've got the skills, we want to keep them, right? We don't want to have to be replacing them all the time and spending all that time and money. So we know that this is a labor-intensive process. How do we make it easier? Well, we know if we do, we're going to have less disruption. We know we're going to have more productivity, and we're going to keep the skills where they should be. There's nothing, kind of sadder than having somebody, leave the organization who's got good skills or got good potential, and they're taking it to someplace else rather than it staying with where it should be, which is with your organization. So those are the kind of things that we want to avoid. So some ways of doing this is, I mean, there are ways that you can probably think of, making sure that you're paying people well, that you're giving them training opportunities, all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of the subtle, small things that can make a big impact that are often not considered. So things like a database of industry-specific terminology that's updated regularly. So this again isn't just important for newcomers. This is important for everybody because again, those terms can change, can update. They can be different from even province to province, even like organization to organization. But if somebody has something like on a shared drive, or if it's sent out in an email and saying, here's this updated list, it's surprising sometimes how important that is for people and how that can make them feel more confident. Whether working with coworkers or meetings with clients, they can feel that they sound more knowledgeable. And so that can really help. Also, things like a spreadsheet of ongoing projects and staff involved. So, with one organization that I did some work with recently, they have this beautiful spreadsheet that they have on their shared drive that everybody has access to, and they can go there and it's updated on a regular basis. What projects are we working on? What service providers are working on those with them? Who are the people involved? What is their contact information? How long is this supposed to run? So these sorts of things are often what employees will identify as things that were lacking. And when they're provided, they're over the moon. They're super, super excited about it. Again, it makes them feel more confident, which is what we want. Some additional supports that are, again, often overlooked but have such a big impact are, when somebody comes to work in your organization, they may be new to your organization up to the point where they only knew about you when they applied for the job. That hopefully they did some research. That's what we always encourage people. But maybe they're not familiar with the area your building is in, or maybe they are new to the country, to the city, to the town, whatever. So additional things that you can do to support them have a really big impact, and it doesn't involve a lot of work, to get the big benefit. So even some things that have been really successful that organizations have done have provided things like bus schedules, right? Told people, here's where the closest bus stop to our organization is. Here's some bus schedules. Even things like lists of local restaurants, clinics, malls, um, even things like community agencies. So that's another thing that I don't know if Mike and Marianne, if it's been sent out yet, but there was a little form or a document where just a few newcomer supporting agencies in and around Medicine Hat are listed, where even if, in the onboarding package, even if not everybody's going to need it, having community supports, etc., help to be able to allow people to deal with issues, because everything kind of tracks back to somebody's life, right? So when somebody comes to work, who knows what else they're dealing with? Are they having a hard time finding a school to enroll their kids in? Do they not have a family doctor yet? And could that be weighing on their mind? And those sorts of things, as much as somebody might try to compartmentalize them, that comes to work with people. So if an organization kind of takes a few moments to give something like that to people in the beginning and saying, hey, here's some things that might help you in some other areas of your life, that means they're bringing their better selves to the work, right? And they feel more supported, more connected. And these are things that employees have said have really made a difference in how they feel about their organization and can really help with retention. These seem small, but they have a really big impact for people. Okay? So don't underestimate exactly how important those can be. And when we talk about, community supports and those sorts of things, reach out. If you have an employee that's told you that they have some issue or whatever, find a support, reach out to them. Maybe sometimes being that bridge can actually help, again, get an employee what they need, so again they can bring their best self to work. So one of the things, of course, our organization works with companies all across Alberta. So we are here, excuse me, not only for cultural advantage, but for other elements. So we definitely encourage you to approach us if you think we have something that might be useful to you. I mentioned the YouTube channel. You've seen a few videos that we have. Those are micro learning videos, just like nice short things, because we're all working folks and we don't necessarily have all of the time in the world. Like, luckily, you guys had the time to come to this Lunch and Learn today, but maybe you want to, just watch a video that's like less than 5 minutes on your lunch break or something that might be related to an issue you might be having. So the Cultural Advantage YouTube channel, there's a QR code here, but I think we can provide a link for that as well. Maybe Enya, you can provide a link in the chat to that. Also, too, I actually do videos for another YouTube channel that we do, and the Cultural Advantage is geared towards employers for intercultural competency. But the Settle Smart Canada YouTube channel is specifically for newcomers, and it contains micro learning videos for all aspects of settlement. So it has stuff about connecting with how to connect with people on LinkedIn, there's advice from employers about, interviewing. There's even videos about how to grow your own food in the Canadian climate, a whole bunch of things. I think we've got about 120 some videos. So this could be another thing that you provide in that kind of onboarding package that people could benefit from. And there's other organizations that certainly have a lot of supports as well. So it's not that companies have to build their own. Stuff exists. You just have to find it and then provide these things in an onboarding package. If somebody doesn't need it, great, but it's there if somebody does, which again is a really nice way to start that relationship early on in the process of somebody coming on board. So that's these are huge topics. Again, with our time frame, we had a chance to kind of poke at them a little bit, but I want to give some opportunity for folks to ask questions. And again, I'll do my best to answer. If I don't have the exact answer for you today, I will make sure that we keep that conversation going and that you have my contact information and you can reach out to me. But I do want to thank you for your time and attention today on the behalf of the Edmonton Newcomer Center, our Cultural Advantage team, of course, Samus and Siwi as well. So I'm going to just pop out of here so I can see everybody's wonderful smiling faces here. And I would encourage you to ask any question that you might have. Oh, I'm going a little blurry here. Let me fix that.
Yeah, please feel free to open up your mics as well too if you want to ask directly or if you want to put some questions on to the chat, we'd really appreciate it. But yes, thank you so much, Julie, for putting this together for us and for all your hard work. Um, we will still be open here for a little while, so if you do want to talk or ask questions, please feel free to do so. But thank you all for being in attendance today. Um, We'll have a link to the recording of this session available to you after we're done here. And I'll be putting on a link to post-session survey, which I just did actually just a while ago. And we'd really appreciate you taking a moment to fill out. Your feedback will help us plan and find future CME workshops. I'll also be emailing you an info sheet and highlights of the concepts that were covered today. Julie had put something together. This info sheet will be, actually, Julie, you could probably talk a little bit about the info sheet itself.
Yeah, so we did a little infographic that kind of took the main concepts that we talked about today, and including a couple other little pieces, and gave a little bit of information because, even in a circumstance like this where the workshop itself, these lunch and learns are fairly short. So obviously there's lots of other information that we could deep dive into this. But once you walk away from this, like the concepts tend to fade if you don't remind yourself. So the infographic is just a very short little thing that has some of those key concepts, and it just kind of helps with retention. And so you can reference it, you could print it off, you could just keep it electronically on your computer, and it just kind of helps keep those things in mind. I've also put my email address in the chat, and I've also put a link to my LinkedIn as well. So I would encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn if you like. That way, I'm kind of at your disposal for other questions about this, or if you wanted to learn more about anything that we talked about today, or additional concepts. So yeah, you can reach out to me using either one of those methods for sure. Yeah.
And Julie had also provided a sheet with the resources she had mentioned earlier of some of the organizations in different areas. I will also be forwarding those in an email as well too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Julie today? Or for any of the senior team? Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Davino, thank you very much for attending. Davino says, thank you, Julie. This is such a great workshop. It is. And thanks to the CB team for putting this together. That's fantastic. And then, yeah, Onyalu, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. Thank you very much for having us as well. Julie, very good workshop. This is so good stuff. Thank you so much for the feedback, people. If there are no questions, like I said, we'll be here for another 10-ish minutes or so. So if you wanted to kind of linger and chat, that'd be great. But on behalf of the CME team, I'd like to thank Julie for her hard work in putting this together as well. Her details are in the chat room. So please, if you ever need to reach out to her and have any questions beyond today, by all means do so. And then, of course, our details are at the CME website at cme.ca. So yeah, thank you all very much for stopping in, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. But yeah, if you have any questions, please let us know. I'm just going to. Perfect. Okay, if there are no questions, that's it. Thank you again. Thanks everyone for coming. See you at the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
And you guys, you let me know if you want to do any kind of follow-up afterwards or